Okay. Good morning, everybody. This is Personal Money Planning, and we're doing our Mindful Money series. And today we are going to be talking about retirement. Basically, what your leisure wear is going to be in your advanced years. Are you going, and how can you get to that point? We'll start out by talking about how much you need. So today we're going to be with Michelle Cooner. She's a CHFC, FPQP, CRPC, CFF, CCC, CFHC. And if you can say that 5 times fast, you win a prize. I don't know what that prize is, but you would get it because that just means that she is very knowledgeable about all things credit and investment and money. And my name is Tina Hoppala. I am the marketing manager and I'm a certified credit counselor. And let's go ahead and get started. Michelle found this quote from George Foreman. He says, the question isn't at what age you want to retire, it's at what income. So today we're going to be talking a lot about the money that you're going to need in those retirement years and how you're going to get there and how to, what kind of math you need to do to figure that out. So go ahead, Michelle, and you take it from here.
I think one of the biggest questions we get when people come in or call us or we do these Zoom meetings is, and not just a question, but a comment that they make is, man, I need to be saving more for retirement. And we often ask, what is it that you're going to be, doing in retirement? Well, I don't know, but I just know I need to save more. And so that's really what we want to focus on is what are you retiring to? And that's going to make a huge difference on what you're going to need. So, Tina, do you have any ideas? I know we're not near retirement yet, but what would you do in retirement if you were able to retire like tomorrow? Maybe not tomorrow. Let's give us a week. Next week, what would you do? What activities would you or hobbies would you take up?
I think I would be doing a lot of just scaling down so I could do a little more traveling and just spending time visiting with family and things like that. So that would be the big thing with me. And what I mean by paring down is having a home that I don't have to do a lot with, and that my
And we've
husband doesn't have
seen
to mow
that.
lawn.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot where, and we've even had a few clients that did have a larger house and they said, we're going to be traveling to see the grandkids. And I think at that time, they had 3 children, many grandchildren, and it was like polar opposites of the United States. And then one somewhat closer to the middle of one of those. And so what they decided to do was they said, we're going to sell our house and we're going to buy a nice RV. And they just drove and did that and spent time at like the KOA parks and visiting the kids. And they loved it. And so, you will see stuff like that. So scaling down is a big one, selling what you don't need really. And I think we touch on this so many times about the value. What value do you have? What do you value in retirement? What types of things do you want to do? And and I think we were going to do a webinar that's just talking about, you probably already have that, because a lot of people buy stuff and they don't really need it. So when we look at what it is that you're going to need in retirement, what is going to make you happy, and what do you value the most? And if that's travel, if that's a hobby, if that's volunteering, whatever that may be, we kind of need to know what that is, because that could be they can all come with different price tags. For instance, with traveling, I looked at airline tickets recent, and they're not way off the chart as that they were before we had the pandemic. And but rental cars, we were talking about rental cars the other day, and it's kind of hard for rental cars. A lot of these places shut down during COVID. And so I think you mentioned your stepdad was having trouble with, like, he travels for work and he was having
Yeah.
issues.
There would be times where there was not a car available when he would get to the airport of the place he was going. You know, he would try to get it ahead of time, but then when he would get there, and a lot of times he has to travel, like he was telling me he had to go to Arizona, and he'd have to be like in Phoenix, you know, Phoenix area. He works for the USDA. And then he would have to go onto the Indian reservations and back again. I mean, that's a lot of traveling.
Yeah.
So,
and that may come with a heftier price tag than gardening. You know, and I was just showing Tina before we signed in. I made another. You can see my woodworking equipment back here in the back. I was actually building another raised flower bed or raised planter box for inside the office here, because I like to have my veggies and stuff growing inside. And so I have like basil and celery and onions and rosemary and all kinds of things back here. But that's something that I would want to do. I want to be able to do more, you know, the things around here at my house. So that's going to come with a pretty low price tag. And some people like to volunteer, and that's usually not going to come with a very big price tag as well. But if you're wanting to sell your home and travel a lot, you may have to look at how you're going to supplement some of that. And it could make a difference on what it is in that dollar amount that you're going to need at retirement. And let me see I'm not able to, oh, there it goes. So let's say that figuring out your annual expenses, rule of thumb is you need about 70 to 80% of your current income. And that's just to kind of give you a ballpark of what you're looking at, because let's face it, you're probably still going to have either a house payment or, you know, your insurance and property taxes. That's still going to be there. You're probably still going to want electricity, water, you know, those are the types of things you're going to want to eat, maybe have, you know, like internet, all those things that you're paying for now don't go away at retirement. In fact, we normally see the initial couple of years in retirement a little bit higher in travel expenses. Like you mentioned, you want to kind of get to do all those things that you really didn't have time to do. That tends to taper off a little bit as you get older. But we do see that tapering off picked up with medical expenses, because as you get older, usually you have more things, you know, more aches and pains and joints that aren't working well. So you may have higher medical expenses. And so that's why we see the travel usually a little bit higher initially. And that's kind of why we put 70 to 80% of the current income, because you may need 80% of that initially, but that may taper off to 70. So a nice even, you know, in between there often works as well. And then we want to take whatever that magic number is and multiply it by either 20 or 25. And that's really what's going to give you how much it is that you're going to need. Now, if you track your expenses, that's even better. You know, if you know exactly how much you're going to need, that's even better, because you may not be buying as many clothes that you do, as many suits. You may not have as much dry cleaning. You may not have to attend as many fancy dinners or buy tickets to social events that you may end up doing while you're working. That may taper off as well. So you can kind of look at that 20 to 25 times your income. To give you what it is that you're going to be aiming for. Obviously, these are rules of thumb. They're not going to be exact. We don't say you're going to need 71.653, percent of this, because we're not drilling down into that far, but we're saying 70 to 80% of your current income. And that's because you're not going to be saving for retirement anymore. You're in retirement. So you're not using that 10 to 15% of savings. You're not paying as any type of employment taxes because you're not working anymore. So 70 to 80% is what we're looking at for current income, and then multiplying that by 20 to 25 to come up with your roundabout needs. So let's take a look at what that kind of an example of that to show you. So let's say that your income right now is $100,000. Your expenses would then be about 70, right? Because that's 70% of that 100,000. Now, if we take that and just do 20 times that gives us $1.4 million needed at retirement. And that sounds like a big number for some, right? Do you have, like, Tina, if I said, okay, yeah, you can retire next week, you're going to need 1.4 million in your account.
I would say I'm never retiring.
But the fact of the matter is you likely won't need that amount because those expenses, it's a run, kind of a rough number. And you probably are going to have some other flooring of income. And the biggest one we see is Social Security, but you may have a pension, like a retirement pension from military retirement or some other type of pension that's offered to you. So you're going to subtract that off of those expenses. So let's say that our expenses we came up with about 70,000. And let's say our Social Security and pension, we're married, each of us get 2,500, which is about what Social Security averages per month for the average household. So that's going to be about 5,000 per month, and that's 60,000 a year. So really, if we look at having that amount, we have our 70,000 of expenses, 60,000 that we have, it's going to leave us about 10,000 from our investments needed. Now, I'm not taking into account taxes on this because that gets a whole different squirrely situation, because what your tax situation is going to depict this. This is just generalization. And so we now know that we only need 25,000 from our investments. Or I'm sorry, 10,000 each year from our investments, right?
Yeah.
We can figure that by doing what we call the 4% rule. And today we're just doing a whole bunch of rules. We're doing rules of thumb. We're doing the 4% rule. We're about to do this rule of 72, whole bunch of rules today. And so what this rule is it was a study done by it's called the Trinity study. And it said, if you have a balanced account, a balanced portfolio, which is 50% stocks, 50% bonds. And this was looked at between the years of 1926 and 2009. So it's worked every time during a 33-year span throughout this whole period of time. And it says that if you draw 4% for 25 years, it will not run out. 100% won't run out. You're not going to run out of money. You're not even going to touch the principal on it. You can draw 4% for 30 years, and there's a 96% success rate. And I'd lay odds on that because you're going to probably adjust that a little bit, your expenses. You may not need that full amount. You may not need that full 10,000, and you're going to turn the spigot up and down through retirement. But what it looked at was inflation rates back from 1913 until now. And it said those inflation rates average 3.2%. And over the average of since 1900, the stock market average return is 7%. Now, you may get a little bit less if you have less than that 50-50 mix. You may get a little bit more if you have more than that 50-50 mix. If you are invested in crypto at all, you might have seen 50% of your investments go down this past weekend, which was a bit of a shock. We have recovered, but you can draw this 4% either for 25 or 30 years and not hit your principal amount. So if you do have to dip into it, it's not a big deal, because if you're earning approximately or average 7% and you're drawing 4% and inflation's about 3%, you should be able to live off of those earnings. Does that make sense so far? It makes sense to me, but I'm weird whenever I think about it.
That does make sense to get to that, your basic living. Once you get to that basic living, you can take these things and know you're going to be okay for that amount of time, because I think that's the biggest thing is in retirement, worrying about running out of money. And so having this set up ahead of time really is helpful, and it helps the mind calm down a little bit.
Yeah, I think by having, and again, you're going to have years that you're going to lose in the stock market. You're going to be below zero on your average returns, and you're going to have years that you're above that 7% average return. So they're saying over this period of time, the average is 7%. So don't worry, because usually we're not going to be in retirement for just 5 years or 10 years. We're going to be drawing off of that for, anywhere from 25 to 35 years. And so it's something that we want to, make sure that's there. You can, if you're a little bit more conservative, you can kind of turn that tap or faucet down and draw 3% or 3.5%. If you're a little more aggressive. And we've seen some of our clients say, my family health is like crap. I mean, no one lives past 72. And so we may be able, and they said, we want to enjoy life. We may be able to turn that up a little bit. And so, but knowing that they have this other flooring and this can be turned up and down as needed. But doing this 4% rule will allow you to not still live. That's kind of a good rule to have, but not have to really dip into a lot of that principal either. So let's take a look at what that does. So if you needed $10,000 per year, which we decided the 70,000 minus our 60,000 we had in Social Security and pensions, we would need $250,000. And the way we came up with that is if you already knew the $250,000, it's just 4% of that, right? 4% would be 10,000. Well, we just divided that 4% into the 10,000. So that's an easier way instead of having to go 300,000 times 4%. Nope, that's not it. 250,000 times 4%, so you can take what you need and then divide that 4% into it to kind of get that balance that you're going to need at retirement. The next question we get is, well, how long is it going to take me to get that amount? Well, we also have the rule of 72. And the rule of 72 lets us know a generalization of how long it takes for our money to double in value. So if we know that we needed at retirement $250,000, then we can take 72 and we can divide whatever interest rate that we are looking at getting. And for this purpose, we use the 7% rate because that's what the average was. So let me put a little pointer here. So if we look at this 72 and we divide it by 7%, it tells us that we're going to need 10.28 years for that money to double. So if we have $125,000 now, we know that in 10.28 years, we would have that $250,000 amount that we're going to need to retire and draw 4% off of to get that $10,000 per year to add to our $60,000 pension, Social Security, and whatever, annuity payments we may have to come up with that total annual expense that we're going to need. Is that clear as mud?
Yeah, it's a little clear as mud. I think that's the point where you say, I need a financial planner to help me, because that's a lot in my head. Because you get to the point where you know what you need, and then I get here and I got a little lost. So
okay, so let's go back then. Let's go back and let's look at what we did again. So you have 100,000 in
go ahead.
So you have $100,000 in income. That's your salary you're living off of. And we know that we're only going to need about 70% of that, right? In retirement. So when we retire, we're only going to need about $70,000 to live on.
Okay.
So we know that we also are going to get Social Security, pensions, whatever. And let's say that totals $5,000 a month. So we take that $5,000, we multiply it by 12, gives us our annual amount of $60,000. So we take what we're going to need, subtract what we have, and we get this $10,000 that we're going to need from the investments.
Okay.
Now, to figure out how much we're going to need lump sum at retirement, we can use the 4% rule.
Okay.
So what we would do is we would say $10,000 is what we know that we need. We're coming up with that balance that we're going to have on the day we retire. So if we look at our calculators and we do $10,000 and we divide it by 4%, then it shows us that amount is going to be $250,000. That gives us $250,000. So we know then if we flip that formula around, that we have 250 times 4% would give us the 10,000, right? So that's how we kind of back into the dollar amount that we're going to need at retirement. Now, to say, like, if for you, Tina, it may be a long time, we may have 20 years or more until we retire. So we can say, okay, how much, if I know that I need $250,000 at retirement, how much do I need to have in the account to be able to get to that? And I look at it as doubling, and that's where we can look at the rule of 72, because we have that time period. So in this first example here, the 72 divided by 7%, we just take whatever our interest rate is that we know that we're going to be getting. In this case, we use 7% because that's the average market return. We divide it into 72, and that gives us 10.28 years. So we know that in 10.28 years, if we have $125,000 in the account now, then we will have $250,000 in the account in 10.28 years. If we won't need that money, let's say for 15 years, then we know that we would, well, in this case, if we needed it in 10 years, we would need a 7.2% annual return, right? Average return.
Okay.
If we wanted to wait until 15 years, we can say, I won't need the money until 15 years from now. We can take that 72, divide it by 15, and we can say, okay, that's going to be a 4.8% return needed. So it's much lower than what that 50-50 mix may be. So that kind of gives us, if we want to wait longer, we won't need as much. But if we do wait and we need it in 10 years and we are willing to do like a little bit different return, that kind of shows us what our mix needs to be. Either we're going to need to come up with that average 7% on a 50-50 mix. But if we're too, let's say, risk averse, let's
Right.
say that we don't want a 50-50. Let's say that we only want to do 40% stocks and 60% bonds, or 30 and 70, then that's going to show us that we need to adjust that 7% number. And then that number, by adjusting the 7%, let's say that we need to, we are comfortable with the 5%. It means that it's going to take us 14 years to reach this amount doubling in our portfolio. Does that make a little bit more sense now?
Yes. I think the thing that got me was taking, you needed to get to 250, and then the rule of 72, finding the number that you needed double.
Yeah. So if we know that we need 250,000, half of that would be 125.
Yeah.
So by doubling it, we would have that 250. So we take half of it, and then we determine how long, if we can put this amount in. So this is a much different amount than that 1.4 million that we looked at on that first screen, right?
Right.
So you may be closer to retiring than you really think whenever it comes to this. And I can tell you, we've had clients in the office before that are like, we need to save. We need to save for retirement. And we kind of go through this situation with them and say, what are you retiring to? What are you going to be doing in retirement? That helps us get that number that we're going to need. We look at any other income that they may have, and we subtract it from that, because we're going to have that no matter what. We don't need that from our investments. We're going to get that check every month, whether it's from our pension, and Social Security is just a pension, let's face it. Where you may have some differences and some deviations, we know that Social Security is inflation adjusted. It's an inflation adjusted pension. Usually a work pension is not. Some government pensions are, like military retirement, but most pensions are not inflation adjusted. So you're going to need to make some adjustments for that as well. And the 4% rule does take into account inflation adjusted. So what it would do is, like, for the first year, it would be 4. And then whatever that inflation is, let's say 3%. So next year you would take the 4,000 plus that additional 3% of 4,000. So it's going to keep up with that inflation rate, the 4% rule does. And that's why it makes it easy. Instead of having to go through and calculate, this year I need this much, the next year I need this much, and then do that inflation on it. This is just a really easy rule of thumb to give you an idea. Now, if you feel like, man, that 250 just doesn't seem like enough, save more. You can have a bigger cushion there. It's much easier to have a bigger cushion than to not have enough. You don't want to strain or to, really having to tighten those belts in certain years. But we know that looking back at, over almost 100 years now, or over 100 years on inflation and average rates of return, this is what it's been. It's not going to say that it's going to continue to do that, but right now, this is what they're looking at. And it does work. It does work as of right now. And so that kind of gives you, when we look at how much you're going to need to retire, and there is a gnat over here, how much you're going to need to retire, this kind of gives you an idea. It's not going to be exact figures. We're not going to have exactly 3% inflation each year. We're not going to have exactly 7% return every single year, but it gives us a general idea and at least wrap our heads around what number that may be. And because, we do have people that are sitting down thinking, well, how much is cable going to be in 15 years? How much is my car insurance going to be in 15 years? And if we start with that 78 to 80% of what you're making now being an adequate number, then it's a little bit easier to kind of gauge what that is. Not exact, but definitely a pretty decent number.
Good starting point for sure.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, like I was saying yesterday, well, I don't know what I want to do when I retire, but I'm also saying, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. I'm almost 50, so I should figure that out soon. But
But this way it does let you know, and you can kind of gauge that as well. And when we have some people come in and say, well, I don't know if I have enough. I know I need to save more. And we look at it and we say, how much are your living expenses right now? 70,000. How much are you getting from Social Security? 60,000. Okay, you need 10,000. How much do you have? 1.5 million. You've got plenty on that 1.5 million. Even 1 million, you're going to be able to draw 40,000 a year. So you're well over that 10,000 mark that you're needing. You're fine. You're fine. And that's saying, yeah, I'm not putting any more in. I'm not working anymore. I'm not contributing more into that. So it's going to keep up with it. And if you do need to tap into some of the principal, is that a problem? Probably not. Some years you're going to have to tap into the principal. Some years you won't. Some years it'll grow. And so, that's something that it's saying over the long period of time. Let's say, around 30 years in retirement, you should be fine with the numbers.
Awesome.
Questions?
Any questions, Walter?
You look perplexed.
Oh, you're muted.
Let's see.
Oh,
he was muted.
Yeah. There he goes.
This is a great presentation. It solves a lot of problems. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. We like doing this. I don't like to get too many calculations going in webinars because people just kind of give me the blank stare. Kind of like what happens when I start talking to John about annuities. He's just like, drool. And so I don't like to do it too many numbers involved in it. But I think this one was a pretty easy one because we hear about these, the rule of 72, the rule of 4% rule. And this is really what it breaks it down to. Is that it is an inflation adjusted draw on that portfolio that should be sustainable for, right around 30 years. 96%.
Great. So next time, that'll be June 30th. That'll be the last Wednesday in June. We'll be talking about being mindful about your net worth and your home inventory. Your home is your castle, and all the stuff in it are your treasure, your gold, I guess. And so we're going to be talking about what that means and how to figure that out as well.
And I think so many people, when it comes to home inventory, usually you'll get like a booklet or something. And they're like, here, write down everything in your home. And you're kind of like, that does not sound like a fun. I would rather be poked in the eye with a sharp stick than have to go room by room and figure out what's in there. But a really easy way you can do that is just to take your phone or a camera and video what's in there, because then you have proof of it. And then you can sit down later and really detail out certain things. And I think on my stuff, even, again, I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to this. I have a label maker. And so I put like QR codes and barcodes on my like my TV and my computer and anything of value like that. And then I scan those into a blog posting that I can keep up with all of that. So I like to do that kind of stuff. What do you do on the weekend? Home inventory. But so it's kind of fun for me, because then I have documentation of everything. And if you don't have like a picture or a listing of everything, it's hard to prove that you do own this stuff. And I know my brother's house got broken into, it was about 10-15 years ago. And he had this, when DVDs are like really big, right? Before you could just like go to Redbox or stream it, he had this wall unit, and it was just shelves of DVDs. And every week he was at the store with, on the new release day, and he would get the new ones and stick them in his collection. And I mean, it was hundreds and hundreds of DVDs. And that's one of the things that were stolen, a lot of the DVDs, because you can offload those for, $5-10. And so those were a lot of things that were stolen. And when he was talking to someone about, or his insurance agent, he said, well, what titles did you have? And he's like, how in the heck would I know that? And he said, well, you don't keep a record of it. And he's like, no. Who does that? I mean, so we went back through and looked, and he said, I know that we did all new releases. So we ended up going back through the years and figured out all new releases, and he highlighted each one of those. And there were hundreds. There were really hundreds of them. And then they wanted him to go find the value of them or when he bought them. And so to keep a log of certain things or to have proof of it, a video would have been fine. He would have been able to show, and you could, probably count out by increasing that image about how many were there, but he had no idea. And so they wanted proof of that. So home inventory is a big thing.
Yeah, we have the same problem because Gellert likes to buy the Blu-ray DVDs.
Yeah.
Because we have the 3D thing that we watch in our living room. And he finds deals and he gets them, but sometimes he forgets that we already have it and he buys it again. So yeah. I'm like, you need to start keeping track. And there's an app that you can keep track of them and even sell them if you want to, but you still have to scan all of them. So it'd just be easier if we just took a picture, like you said.
Well, and I think so many people are looking at, this is I have this TV and I bought it at this. And when you walk through the house and do that, you can say, this is a TV. It's this is my computer screen, but an Insignia 42-inch TV. And then I have this computer and I bought it about this, because you kind of know those things. I bought it last year or the year before, and it was about this amount. And so you can walk through. And one thing that we noticed about this stuff is we always put the electronics on there. We have a computer, we have the laptop, we have the TV, but we're not really looking at things like, furniture. We say, okay, there's a couch and but furniture is a huge expense. I bought a couch like a year and a half ago and I was like, what? When did the prices go up so high on these things? And so that's something that we don't normally look at. But even things like if you're doing a video, some of the light plates, like the little light fixture things, I didn't know that I had to spend $12 to $15 per switch plate. And I didn't get the cheapy plastic ones. I got some nicer ones. This one's a Wemo, but on my other ones in the bedroom, we got like the metal ones that are decorative. And I'm like, holy cow, that's expensive, because usually you're going to be buying the light switch and the sockets and that, that's hundreds of dollars. And so I doubt that someone's going to break in and steal my light switch, but if my house caught on fire and maybe those are damaged or burn up or whatever. You want to have some proof of that. So just walking through the house and showing the stuff that you have, you'll actually have a very solid foundation of what's in the house. And then you can spend time going back through that later and saying, oh, as you're watching your video, TV, couch, grandma's drop leaf table, you can figure out all those things later. But to get it done, that's the quickest way to do it, and store it in the cloud. Don't keep it on your phone that you may lose. Store it in the cloud, whether it's, like a Google video or somewhere, OneDrive, or what are some of the other Dropbox.
If you email it to yourself and then save it in your email, if you archive your emails, you can save it into a Google Drive. You can save it into your Dropbox, like you just said.
Sometimes the videos may be too big to send via email, but put it on a YouTube.
Yes.
Open up YouTube and then just make it a private thing. Yeah. You can totally do that. But yeah, find a way of storing it and then just updating it every couple of years or so. But we're going to be talking about that next time.
So that's next time.
Yeah.